Everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Amanda. This is a vlog of my life after getting an autism and ADHD diagnosis about 2.5 years ago at the age of 42. This is all about unmasking and learning what it means to live as an autistic adult. First off, in case I forget, I am planning on changing my username, which is currently I am mind blind. Just because I feel like I've kind of outgrown that name, and I've been meaning to say it in the last couple of videos to get people prepared for seeing something new, but I keep forgetting to mention it. I'd hoped to make the change already, but as you will see in this video, things have been a little bit hectic. So for this video, it's probably still going to go up as I am mind blind. This video today's Saturday, probably going to post it tomorrow on Sunday. Oh, that's Mother's Day. At least in the US. I don't know. We'll see. I don't think anybody's going to watch it on Mother's Day, but it is what it is. Okay. Well, so happy Mother's Day if you celebrate. But if you don't, please, I hope that you can find some way to, I don't know, I just do not like commercialized holidays. Okay, that's not what this video is about. So I'm going to get to the topic of this video. Just know that I have good intentions and well-being to everybody, whether or not Mother's Day is a hard day or a good day for you. Okay, so actually the day that I posted my last video, which was May 1st, I was a video talking about parasocial relationships. I think it's actually a really important video for a lot of people in the autistic community. So if you haven't watched it, I do recommend watching it. But later that day, my husband fell and broke his arm in a very, very dramatic way. Basically, my dog had run out the door, and my husband, without quite thinking about it, because the dog was running after a FedEx truck, my husband tried to be like a hero and sprint after the dog. And he just kind of took off. He leapt over the flower bed, took like a couple of strides after that, but lost his balance. And our front yard is not very deep. And so he hit the sidewalk, concrete sidewalk, in some kind of rolly, tumbly fashion. The Ring doorbell did not catch it, but he is scraped from top to bottom, and he has a mild hairline fracture in his left arm, and he has a completely clean break across both of his bones in his right arm, and he has like a small little issue with his right wrist. I'm saying issue because I don't remember the term the doctor used. Dr. Willie wasn't worried about that one at all. Especially because, well, yeah. So we had to go to the ER that was a Thursday night. We went to the ER, and he had to have it temporarily set in a very, very painful procedure that I am not going to go into detail about because it would need content warnings. I got to watch it. I'm not sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but it was very, very painful, even with pain meds in him. And they wrapped it up, and the ER doctor said that he really wants him to have surgery the next day on Friday, and sent all his information to I'm just going to call it a bone doctor. I don't know, orthopedist, I think, and told us to call first thing in the morning and try to book a surgery because, that works in America. Hashtag no, it doesn't. So the next morning we called right when they opened, and the receptionist was like, "We don't do surgeries on Fridays." But of course you don't. And the best she could do was get us a consultation with a doctor the following Monday. So poor husband, luckily did get some pain pills from the ER prescribed, and he had enough, thankfully, to last till Monday. We saw the doctor, and then they told us that he could have surgery on Tuesday or Thursday. They would call us later that afternoon and let us know. Luckily, we did get in on Tuesday this week, so earlier this week, and he had to go under anesthesia, and they reset the bones, and they put two metal plates in both of the bones. And now he's in another splint that he has to only have for 2 weeks because the metal plates are doing most of the work. And then after that, he will be in, and he's got a brace on this arm too. So he's got a removable brace on this arm and a splint on this arm. And we're not sure how long this one's supposed to stay on. He's just going to leave it on until our next appointment to check on this one, and then we'll ask. And then after he takes this one off, he'll be in a brace in this one for several weeks. And then he'll have to do physical therapy for a little while. So, and mind you, I had hysterectomy surgery a little less than 2 months ago, which is a 12-week recovery. So it's been a lot. Thankfully, I'm far enough along in my recovery that I've been able to help my husband out as much as possible. He's actually pretty self-sufficient, surprisingly, but he has trouble opening jars and fixing some food. He was actually made a sandwich the other day. He can't move his wrist at all, but he's got some use of his fingers. And the first couple of days, of course, were the worst before he had the surgery. But I have just been like going. And yesterday I finally, I crashed out. And so I did want to talk a little bit about how all of this going on in my life relates to me being autistic and ADHD. So, one thing that a lot of autistic and ADHD people are good at is handling a crisis in the moment. Now, of course, we're not a monolith, and this isn't for everybody, but there are a lot of autistic and ADHD people that in the moment of a crisis, our brains are really good at just, boom, handling the crisis and then crashing later. So I had like a little mini crash after the ER. Like once I got my husband to the ER, this is like a little TMI, but I'm gonna, we're real here, right? So I got him to the ER, which, I'm sure spiked both of our adrenaline. And then once I got him checked in and knew he was safe, let's just say I had to run to the bathroom. And we'll leave it at that. But then I was like, okay, again, for a while. And then over the course of several days, I've been going. And that was like a different level. And then yesterday, it was like my body is like, you are done. And but it wasn't, because I'm a mom and an adult. And right now my husband can't drive. And my kids had some appointments that we couldn't miss. So I did have to do a couple of adult things yesterday. But other than that, I basically spent the day on the couch just recovering, right? So one reason why autistic people can handle things in a crisis moment is that thing that is really bad for us a lot of times is called alexithymia, where we don't necessarily identify our emotions in the moment. And then we can also have something called delayed emotion integration. Basically, our brains go into task mode. It doesn't necessarily mean we're calm, but we can appear very calm. Basically, our brain's suppressing every single feeling and emotion in that moment, and we just are in survival mode. This is really good for society because we can handle the crisis and recover after the crisis is over. Unfortunately, a lot of neurotypical people will look at us and think that we are cold, that we are showing emotional detachment, and that we don't react appropriately to crisis situations. But that often, that's just not usually the case. The case is that our brains are going into a survival mode, and then we will deal with our emotions when it's safe to. So those of us with ADHD, our brains are dopamine hungry, and crises, in a way, can be dopamine because it is a novelty. All of a sudden, there's something new happening. There's a sense of urgency, and the adrenaline, like I said, will kick in. So for people with ADHD, a crisis can be like an intense hyperfocus that lets us really quickly problem solve because our brains are firing all out, and we can perform incredibly well in that moment. Then as soon as that dopamine or the crisis settles down, boom, big crash. There's also something that's called the functional freeze, where it's basically you are functioning through a crisis, a trauma situation. You could really appear calm and capable, but you're actually working on reserve battery power. So in the moment when my husband hit the ground, I was out there like seconds later behind him, and I looked at him. I looked at the dog that was running down the street. My brain was like, which one needs the most immediate attention? He was starting to stand up. He wasn't passed out or anything like that. So I went after the dog, and I told him, go inside, because he was walking. And got the dog in safely, which was really funny because as many people as we told this story to, very few people asked us, is the dog okay? So that was really interesting. Anyway, so got my husband in. My kids had come downstairs. One of them got him an ice pack because at that point we were still kind of triaging, figuring out what was going on. It was very, very, very obvious he had broken his arm. It was again, I don't want to get graphic. I will just say it was extremely obvious it had been broken. The bone did not break the skin, though. So I wrapped it up in a scarf with the ice pack, determined that it was probably safe for me to drive him to the hospital instead of calling an ambulance because he, like I said, he hadn't lost any consciousness and he was doing okay at that point. So I made sure that my kids were settled, very briefly. My kids are teenagers, so it was, it was okay to leave them at home. And I knew bringing them to the ER would just be more overstimulating for them than necessary because they're also autistic ADHD. And I told them to call my mom, who's local. And then that way, if they felt like they needed another adult, she's just a few minutes away. And then I got my husband to the hospital. And then, like I said, once he was checked in, I had a moment to myself. It's and then again, kicked back into, okay, let's figure this out mode. So some other things that affect when an autistic ADHD person has a crisis in their life. My husband is my support person for a lot of things. And so having him out of commission has made me kind of have to push through a little bit more than I normally would have to. So I'm considered low support needs, but even before my diagnosis, my husband's always kind of been a support person for me. And he's still, like I said, he's still been able to do a lot, but he can't drive right now. And I do drive a lot. I drive a lot more than he does, honestly. But just having your support person not functioning the way you're used to, it's a little dysregulating. And I'm not saying that anything bad about, him needing, obviously emergencies happen and we're coping and we're dealing with it. It just means that the roles kind of shifted a little bit and we're having to problem solve and get creative how we do things. Honestly, even though he's my support person, I take care of him a lot. We're really balanced, So he takes care of me in a lot of like emotional ways. Like he'll help me work through phone calls that I need to make. And I don't know. That's not the point of this video. So another one that's a biggie is pathological demand avoidance. Luckily for me, my PDA, which is usually pretty darn strong, hasn't triggered very much with this. But oftentimes, if somebody else needs more support than I can give, or even it's not even necessarily if I want to or not. A lot of times I want to help somebody, but if PDA kicks in, it is like a brain gremlin like none other, and it can be really hard to overcome. So in a lot of situations like this, somebody with PDA might actually struggle really hard to be that support person their husband needs, or their partner. And for me, this time, luckily, at least so far, that hasn't happened, except for, like I said, I'm still recovering from hysterectomy surgery. And so my exhaustion level is not where it normally would be. And so there's been a couple of times where it's like he's asked me to do something, which was completely reasonable request. And I'm like, I have to just take a moment and go, yes, this is a reasonable request. He needs help. I can do this. I have a little bit more ability than he does right now. So let me go ahead and do this for him. So that's a thing. Another thing that came up was that I had a haircut scheduled for Tuesday, the day he ended up having surgery. And I was really looking forward to the haircut. I still am. I have it. It's rescheduled for next week, thankfully, because see, she normally books out 6 weeks in advance. And so when I knew I had to cancel my appointment, I was worried I wasn't going to get another one for 6 weeks. And I know it's just a freaking hair appointment, and the surgery is like a million times more important. But 2 things can be true at once. And I was really looking forward to getting my haircut, and then knowing I had to cancel it without knowing when I'd be able to reschedule. I did have a little bit of a selfish me moment. And I was like, is there a way that I can make this all happen at once? Can I go to my hair appointment and figure out how to do the surgery? Which of course, no, because the timing was not going to work out for that. So I, obviously canceled this hair appointment, but I did have this moment where it was like, I wanted my routine. I wanted that was my plans, and having to rework my entire week for this emergency that came up, took some mental shifting because I'm autistic. So it's not that I don't want to, or I wouldn't be willing to. It just takes a little bit more, or a lot more processing power to change these routines that I had set up. And so to a neurotypical person, it could come across as being selfish, or too rigid, or, all these different things. And again, it's not that I wouldn't want to or shouldn't. It's not that I wouldn't want to or had any real plans of not canceling the appointment to help be there with my husband for surgery. It's just that my brain took a little bit extra time to process the steps that I had to do to get there. So another thing that happened because of being autistic is that after the surgery, when I went back to be in the recovery room while John was waking up, I was really nervous because, well, not nervous, but yeah, alexithymia. It's hard to name emotions sometimes. So, when you're seeing somebody coming out of surgery, he had the oxygen mask on. He just looked more frail. It doesn't look like the husband that I'm used to seeing. And so that kind of activates your nervous system a little bit. And I guess I kind of put a nervous smile on my face, and kind of was giggling, which is common for a lot of autistic people. A lot of times our faces and expressions don't match the tone of the environment we're in. And it was so sweet. He was waking up and I was like nervous giggling. And he said, "Why are you laughing at me?" And I'm like, no, I'm not, baby. I'm not. It's nervous giggles. I'm worried about you. You're doing good. Keep waking up. Keep breathing. And then he fell asleep. He doesn't remember saying that at all. It was like right as he was waking up. I will say that was actually very actually stressful situation that happened for me. His surgery went over the time that they said. Nothing went wrong. It just ended up being more difficult to set than the doctor had predicted it would be. But nobody came out and told me that. So it went over quite a bit longer. He was the last name up on the surgery board. None of the other family members were in the waiting room anymore. The waiting room had completely emptied out. And the desk staff went home for the day. And I think that they should have come over to me before they left because I was sitting in the waiting room. And I think they should have told me an update if they could have gotten one, or that if I needed anything, do XYZ. Because if I needed something, there was no one to contact because the doors, back to where my husband was, obviously were like locked for safety. So I look up and the desk staff was gone. I was in this waiting room all by myself. It was huge, huge lobby space. And thankfully it was a really sunny day because I was texting a friend. I was like, if it was like pouring down rain and because we get, dramatic weather up here in the Pacific Northwest, I'm like, this would be freaking eerie. I mean, it was already eerie, but the sun at least helped. And the other thing is I found out later is that the doors, the nurse wasn't sure, but she said that she thinks that they lock at 5 o'clock. And it was right at 5 o'clock p.m. And so if I'd gone out, I would have been able to get back in. So weird. Anyway, so I was already sitting back there completely trying not to freak out all by myself with no way to find out really what was going on with my husband. But the nurse knew that I'd be the last one out there because he was the last one on the surgery board. So she actually came and got me early. And she said normally she would not bring a family member back to the recovery room that soon because they're not quite awake yet and they say things that they weren't going to remember and stuff like that. But she said that she didn't want me out there freaking out. And I was like, thank you so much. Because that was the worst part, I think. Because I was all by myself. Because again, like I said, my kids stayed at home because to regulate their nervous systems. And there just really wasn't, I didn't really need anybody out there. But until that time when I'm like, oh God, I wish I had a friend. But I did have a friend I was texting back and forth with, and that was super helpful. So the last thing I want to talk about is when a crisis hits and you're neurodivergent. Many neurodivergent people are already kind of living at a closer to burnout baseline than an average person. So when a crisis hits, we don't have necessarily more of a buffer. So I was already healing from a hysterectomy, which was very disruptive for the family. And we were just kind of starting to get back to a normal, regular routine. And then this hit, and I hadn't really built up reserves. So yesterday, it was just finally everything just crashed. I spent most of yesterday resting. I spent most of today also resting. I've done very, very little today just to kind of build back my reserves for the weekend because Monday got to hit the door running again with, adulting things. So a broken bone in a neurotypical family probably could be crisis, and then everything kind of goes back to normal fairly quickly. For us, though, having their dad at the hospital also activated my kids' nervous systems. So they were kind of dysregulated for the next couple of days. Totally understandable. But again, wouldn't necessarily happen in a neurotypical family. The kids, might be scared or upset. But as soon as they figure out their adult is fine, they're probably going to bounce back a lot faster. But for us, our whole family has been very, very dysregulated. But it's all okay. My husband's going to be fine. We're lucky it was a very clean break. There was no bones shattered or anything like that. That would take much longer to heal from. And like I always like to say, there's no comparing traumas. Yes, there are definitely people who have had much, much more traumatic injuries, and their families are dealing with it. This is what happened with our family. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that, life altering of a problem, but in the right here in the right now, it was a big disruptive thing that happened. And, having metal plates in your arm is going to cause troubles down the line. Some patients actually have to having them taken out, but hopefully he won't have to, because the doctor said keeping them in is better, because this bone will always be a little bit more fragile than before the break. The last thing I want to add is, again, a lot of the things that I talked about are related to my experience of autism, and every autistic person is different. And I usually do respond very well in a crisis situation. I've had that in the past too. But if you're autistic and ADHD and you just go into full shutdown mode during a crisis, that's okay. I'm not saying that anybody is better for being able to handle a crisis in the moment or not, because how we are is how we are, and it's not good or bad. If you know that you are somebody who does not handle crises very well, it's important to know that about yourself and know what you can accomplish in a crisis. Maybe you cannot drive your husband to the hospital because you'd be too dysregulated, but you can hopefully dial your emergency contact numbers. And maybe you could get the dog to safety. There might be some things that you can do, and then delegate to people around you. It doesn't help anybody in a crisis situation to not be able to help, but then also become part of the crisis because you're having a meltdown. So if at all possible, if you know that you're somebody who cannot function in a crisis situation, it is okay to acknowledge that and then just remove yourself and make sure that somebody else is handling the situation. Sometimes knowing our limitations is the thing that we can do to make a difference. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this video and got some good information out of it, because I do like to, again, vlog my life, but I also really work hard to try to turn it back into how autism, ADHD, aphantasia, or my memory disorder kind of affect the things that are going on in my life, because having a neurodivergent brain literally affects everything. Until the next video, and keep a lookout for the channel name change. I'm not going to announce it yet. It'll just show up because I don't want to pre-announce it and then have someone try to take it, unfortunately, because people are that way. Anyway, I don't know when I'm going to get to that, because there's executive functioning steps that need to happen to change your name. And right now they all feel very overwhelming, but I just want to do it because it's not just for YouTube, but I want to change it on Instagram, TikTok. I haven't really been on Blue Sky lately. I actually forgot it existed again. Although I do want to try to use Blue Sky. I just really hate its user interface. So, all right. Bye, guys.